In 2022, they held the presidency and we won the election. Now, they are not so much in opposition and are having a hard time with political coordination, but above all, with presenting a proposal to the Brazilian people. Because first, they are sellouts, they don't defend our sovereignty, they are not patriots, and they have nothing to say about the everyday economy. Because in their time, when they handed over Brazil in 2022, the economic situation was very critical.
I am pleased to welcome federal lawmaker Gleici Hoffmann to our discussion, former Minister of Institutional Relations in Lula's government, pre-candidate for the Senate for Paraná. With a long political career, she was president of the PT, senator and deputy. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to talk with you and welcome.
So what we don't want is for them to intervene in the electoral process, whether through social media platforms or through the economy, through extra tariffs on Brazil, which have no factual or economic basis.
Do you see the tariff as an intervention by Donald Trump's government trying to benefit the other candidate, President Lula's opponent? Are you afraid, for example, that the United States might question the election results or the integrity of the Brazilian electoral system?
No, I'm not afraid of that, because the United States doesn't have the moral standing or legitimacy to do that. Our electoral system is respected all over the world, and our electronic voting machines are tested. In fact, our system is better than the American system, much better, much more advanced. First of all, the United States has a positive trade balance, meaning they sell more to us than we sell to them. So there's no justification. We saw the encouragement from the Bolsonaro family. First, Eduardo Bolsonaro went to the United States, then Flávio Bolsonaro, all of them very determined to take this action to pressure the Brazilian justice system.
Lula's inner circle has been responding in a stronger tone, and I can mention the Minister of Finance, who called the Argentine president a clown. Minister Guilherme Boulos also said that Milei is a pathetic caricature, and yesterday you also went on social media and said that Milei is Trump's bootlicker. So my question is, this reaction from the president's allies, is it a coordinated, organized action, and isn't there also a risk of further straining this relationship by making these kinds of...
I gave a political response to a political act that the president of Argentina had here. He came to our country and offended our president, offended a Supreme Court justice. He needs to behave like a president. He needs to know that he represents a nation that has commercial relations with Brazil, with economic interests, and also a long-standing relationship. It's important that this investigation was opened, because it's not acceptable for someone to treat us like this. Internationally, to have this amount of money involved to make a movie, which isn't even a big production film, this is very serious, especially when it comes to an action involving someone who is being investigated for bankrupting a bank and putting the Brazilian financial market at risk. Whether or not it will have electoral consequences depends on the outcome. But the investigation has to happen, and he and Flávio Bolsonaro have to answer for it.
But the latest Quest poll, released earlier this week, shows that Álvaro Dias is ahead with 20% of the vote. And there's a second group there, very close, with a statistical tie between four candidates who are Alexandre Cury, Deltan Dallagnol, you, and Felipe Barros. But how will it be? What's your plan there when the candidacy is launched, when you can go out on the streets already as a candidate? To see if you intend to nationalize this debate for the Senate or not, if President Lula himself has committed to helping your Senate candidacy, so that's the first point. And the second is about Deltan Dallagnol. He appears there in that second group, technically tied with you and others. Do you think he should really run in the election? There's that issue of ineligibility. And if it's better to run with him or without him, because theoretically his votes would go to candidates closer to Dr. Dallagnol's line of thinking. Deltan.
Look, Cesar, first of all, the poll is just a snapshot of the moment. And let's point out that we still have almost 70% of the electorate undecided about the Senate seat. The Senate is the last position people decide on when voting. This year we vote for president, governor, federal representative, state representative, and 2 senators. So It's the last vote. Second, Deltan Delagnol is ineligible. He was removed from office. He was elected and then removed because he bypassed the CNMP's internal process to avoid answering these cases, and he was removed because of the clean record law. He has now filed a request for an electoral certificate, which we are obviously questioning. Because he is not eligible, he is removed from office. His rights are suspended until 2029. So I don't believe he will be a candidate, and there's no way to discuss or debate a fraudulent claim he is making. Third, I will definitely be together with President Lula. I am on Lula's ticket. We are together with him, with the king and his son. Anyway, with our coalition that mirrors the national coalition in the state of Paraná. By the way, Lula, 3 times president of the republic, but let's remember here that he made Dilma his successor and got her re-elected. So, 5 times the Workers' Party has taken office at the Planalto Palace. There is no parallel with any other party, with any other leadership in this short history of Brazilian democracy. The other day I saw Flávio Bolsonaro at the supermarket talking about prices from 2019 and comparing them to prices now. 2019 didn't have the effects of his government. When we took over the government, it was a very tragic situation. Very high prices, unemployment, low income. President Lula has much more to say about what he did in these 4 years than what they did. I think we need a stronger political and communications push to speak to the population about the stability we are experiencing in the country and the important moments. We have jobs, we have income, we have prices going down. Food inflation just came out, it dropped. So we have delivered a lot for the everyday economy, and I think that's what really matters in people's lives.
Do you think then that the government's messaging makes a mistake by insisting so much on this theme of sovereignty and maybe not defending this legacy that you just described now of inflation having slowed down? Resume social programs and cost of living.
Sovereignty is very important, even to show who really defends the country's sovereignty and who is patriotic. It's not the ones who wrap themselves in the Brazilian flag. It's not the ones who wear green and yellow shirts. It's the ones who defend the interests of the Brazilian economy, who fight for the Brazilian economy to prosper and for us to truly have a developing economy, which is what President Lula does, negotiating with dignity with all countries and bringing dividends to our economy.
I'll call Anita Prado to ask another question, candidate.
Candidate, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you the following. I have contacts within the government who say that there is now a big effort to win over city council members. Mayors and governors who are from the centrist bloc and who could eventually switch to President Lula's side during this pre-campaign, acting as vote-getters throughout Brazil, especially in the countryside, to help gather votes for President Lula. Do you think, as a former Minister of Institutional Relations, do you believe it is still possible to bring people who were once allies of President Bolsonaro to now support President Lula?
What brings electoral victory is empathy with the Brazilian people. It's about saying what we are doing, what we represent, and what Lula represents for the pride of this country and for the everyday economy. So we will have our core alliances with these left-wing parties, center-left, and with factions of the central parties from the center-right, who have always acted like this in presidential campaigns.